Thank you. We'll be fairly brief. It's just to introduce a project that we've been running for about a year now, which is going to finish up in February and speaks to data and gathering facts to support live music. As a team, we've been researching live music for about a decade now, first as social history from 1950 into the 21st century, first volume available now, the second, I'm told, coming soon. I'm not getting any royalties for them, so I can plug them unashamedly. And then in 2012, the formation of a research network called Live Music Exchange, which was really about building bridges between academics, industry, and policymakers, and translating what can often be quite esoteric academic research for public consumption. And that was really important because it informed our way of working. In partnership with venues and musicians, not researching on them, but working with them. Meanwhile, policymakers and importantly the research councils are increasingly interested in the value of live music, economic value, very much a forethought, but increasingly cultural value too. So we work with two projects there. The first with the Queen's Hall in Edinburgh, looking at different promotional models, different genres, different audiences within one venue. And the second, looking at different funding, different types of funding, from small scale through large scale commercial to state funding in three areas in Glasgow, Camden and Leeds, right the way up that ladder from grassroots to arenas and stadiums, and working there with the Musicians Union, with PRS and with UK Music. Meanwhile, back in Edinburgh, there was concern locally over venue closures and a broader sense that the city's live music was under pressure. Pressure, as you all well know, not unique to Edinburgh. But matters in Edinburgh came to a head after the closure of the Picture House, certainly in the public eye. Although what really concentrated minds was what followed when in 2014 the Young Fathers won the Mercury Prize in 2014, a chance you would think for the council to celebrate its role in Edinburgh's popular culture. Or not so much. You can't quite see the quote there from the Young Fathers. Edinburgh Council are really fucking bad. They shut down anything if you try to make noise. I've been in studios where these guys come with meters and tell you to get out. It's a city for tourists and rich middle-class people, not made for people to be creative. So that kind of concentrated the mind of the council, as you might imagine. The vice convener of the Culture and Sport Committee held a public meeting and set up a working group, Music is Audible. And that working group, Music is Audible, took its name from what emerged at the public meeting, a sense that a big part of the problem was a clause in the city's licensing that amplified music had to be, quote unquote, inaudible in neighbouring premises. So that was part of an imbalance in the city that while for a month every summer it seemed like the whole town centre becomes a venue, the city was finding it difficult to sustain and support grassroots music locally for the rest of the year. So we offered, as researchers, to research the matter. Clearly there was a problem, but what was the extent of it? Where did it lie? There was also some sympathy within corners of the council, but not much specific data to act on. So we conducted in 2015 the Edinburgh Live Music Census, a pilot study for what we're doing now. And to cut a long story short, some key findings: 42% of venues reporting online that they were experiencing noise issues, 44% of musicians reporting that gigs had been affected by noise restrictions, inaudibility clause coming up frequently, all of which suggesting that there was indeed a chilling effect on venues' willingness to put on live music. To cut an even longer story short, this was extremely helpful in getting a public consultation running on amending that clause. which last year was successful. But some crucial points here are that getting that change involved a lot of cooperation across different parties, academics, journalists, venue operators, including hard work from some people here, including on the panel just about to follow. The council was not monolithic. There were pockets of sympathy, but they couldn't really move forward. They would have struggled to get that consultation moving in the first place without data to illustrate their point. So inspired the fact that it could actually make a difference on the ground, we moved to the national census, which Emma's going to talk about now. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. So, why do a live music census in the first place? Okay, so as you probably know, live music revenue overtook recording revenue in 2008 in the UK, but there's still very little known about live music activity. As Michael said, other than sort of PRS and UK music data, it does appear that certainly the grassroots sector is struggling, and as Michael said, 35% of grassroots venues in London were lost between 2007 and 2015. Added to this, we know from events like Venues Day that there is absolutely an appetite for data from policymakers, local authorities, and economic development groups. So our starting point for the census is that we know that live music is important, and we hope that our census provides further evidence of this and about the ways that it's important. So what are we trying to find out? We're trying to find out, better understand the economic, social and cultural value of live music and about live music venues. We also want to better understand the challenges facing the sector. So we worked with our project partners, Musicians Union, Music Venue Trust and UK Music, and a number of consultants, including Attitude is Everything and Julie's Bicycle, to come up with the methodology and the survey questions for the UK Live Music Census. So earlier this year, we ran 7 24-hour snapshot censuses in cities across the UK, including Glasgow, Newcastle, Gateshead and Oxford. And at the same time, we ran online surveys for audiences, musicians, promoters and venues. We got great coverage in the national and local media. So I'm going to use the rest of my time to give you just a very few early findings from the census. And this is very much focusing on the social and cultural value of live music venues. I should just add that all of this is provisional at this point. Okay, so the first thing, over 3/4 of small and medium music venues do more than just stage live music events. So more than half operate a bar or restaurant outside concert hours. Over 1/3 of venues offer social and education activities such as community work and courses. And more than 1/4 offer tools and space for musicians such as rehearsal rooms and recording studios. And I should say that we're not suggesting that venues should do this, but it's just useful for illustrating cultural value. So in another question, I don't know if you can see that against the kind of blue light in here, but musicians were asked to name a venue which had been significant to them and to say why. And as you can see, many of the venues identified by musicians are at the smaller end of the scale. We asked the same question to audiences, and again, you can see how the census data helps to highlight the importance of venues across the whole spectrum, not just those at the top, but very much at the smaller end of the scale. So we also asked musicians and audiences to say why those named venues have value. I'll just give you a flavour of some of the reasons given, and I've been really enjoying reading the data from audiences and musicians about why they value these venues. It's been a real pleasure to do as a job. Okay, so live music venues form an essential part of people's life stories. Live music venues support local or emerging artists on new projects. Another one, venues may have a symbolic status which in turn endows value on performers. For example, the venue is regularly named as the UK's best small venue, a big step and honour to support several well-known touring acts. To then host our own night as headline act was pivotal in gaining great press and exposure. So again, venues as supporting aspiring emerging artists. Okay, so the next point is that venues allow for the discovery of new artists or genres. And venues allow audiences to spend time with friends or family or make new friends and acquaintances, and for artists to build and develop networks. And finally, people value venues which are locally accessible, particularly if it's the only local venue of its type. So, for example, nice small venue, great acoustics. Apart from pub gigs and one-off venues, this is the only venue within a 60-mile radius. So that's just a tiny flavour of some of the findings of the census so far. And we're going to be publishing the final report in February 2018. I'm just going to whiz through what I was going to say, what was in it, and just talk about our toolkit. So as the next panel will be talking a lot about, the more data we have, the better, and the better that we can make this case, as Michael was saying, to Parliament and other key figures. So we're going to be publishing our open source methodology next year in a toolkit which will be available free of charge from our website for anyone who wants to take on their own local live music census. So I'll finish off just to say thank you for your time and listening to us today. Thank you to all of those in the room who got involved in this year's census. Do get in contact with us if you have any questions or comments. Adam and I will be around for the rest of the day. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to Adam and Emma. So this panel is all about facts and evidence and data. And you may be sitting there thinking, well, what's that got to do with you? It's all very interesting, but what can you give to it? Why would you need it? How are you going to fit it into your busy lives? And these are all really good questions, and that is what this panel is all about. The panel is called Facts Matter, Changing Opinions. Now, that might be on two levels. First of all, you've heard already this morning about changing opinions at a national level. Government and policy makers and lawmakers, the sorts of people who can take those facts and evidence and change things for everybody in a way that helps you. And we've talked about that already this morning. And so we need to constantly draw out the problems and the issues that they need to know about, but also on an individual basis for individual venues, which is where somebody like me might come in. And we've said you never want to see me again, and that would be true. But if you ever did, on the day that we meet, that is not the day to start to try and put together evidence and information about your venue, your case, your problem, the objections from residents, police, local councillors, and all the rest of it. It needs to be an ongoing exercise for protection and prevention for individual venues as well. And that's what we want to draw out from this particular panel as to how it's of immediate relevance to you and not just general relevance for policy change in the future, although there's a lot of that going on at the minute. It's a very dynamic and vibrant environment at the minute for changes in law and policy, which we will want to look at. If we get time, I've got a case study for you about the Electric Ballroom in Camden that has just had the worst happen to it and then the best happen to it, and that was all about evidence and data and information. But let's get cracking with the panel first, because there's quite a lot to get through. I'm going to go down the line now and ask each of our panellists just to tell you quickly who they are, but not to introduce themselves in great detail because that's in your packs, and then give us some sound bites as to what they would need from you, what information and input they need from you to help them do their jobs, to help you when you need it. So, Natalie, kick off for us.
Hello. Testing. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. I just can't hear myself. So my name's Natalie Williams. In my role, the data is key whenever having any conversation with policymakers or government. Everybody knows, everyone has ideas on how things work and what we want to change, but unless you actually have facts and evidence, your argument is totally redundant. And I think what's really important from my perspective is the fact that, specifically for music venues, it's a very reactive ecosystem. If something goes wrong, that's when everyone jumps up to try and make some sort of change. For what I do in particular in my role is that we're constantly asking for information and surveys, and no one ever wants to fill out a survey. I don't like filling out a survey. It takes too bloody long. But sharers are always asking me for feedback on everything, and I don't want to give it to them. But if you can build up that data set of what's going on, that provides you a platform to have the dialogue and the conversation. And as I constantly stress, it's it's the currency when trying to get anything changed or to prove your theory for what you need to be amended or to disprove a theory of what someone else is claiming. I'd say probably a recent example for this week is the published results of the Form 696 issue that's been going on with regards to the grime industry in particular. But that actually that inception came from someone thinking, hold on a minute, Met Police could be racially profiling a particular genre of people that are doing one type of music and are having an issue when booking acts or actually performing. Maybe we need to look into this. And it took Ticketmaster, for example, to actually go through, do a survey, publish those results, and now it's started a dialogue and a conversation, and it's something that my organisation will probably be looking to pick up as well, to push through for policy-wise. So I think that I'd agree with probably the rest of the panel when they start putting through their examples of why facts matter. Everyone can have a theory, but if you don't have the actual data for the actual fact, people can only believe facts.
Thank you. Passing over to Nick then. Nick Stewart, Sneaky Pete's in Edinburgh.
So I run a music venue in Edinburgh called Sneaky Pete's, and as Adam mentioned earlier, there was a very onerous inaudibility clause which was stuck in the city, which came in from the licensing board. And partly through the work going on with the survey, we were able to prove a lot about the conditions how conditions for live music venues were really stifled, about how musicians felt about it, but also about how the public felt about it. Because this licensing process led into having a survey of the public and public opinions. That was another set of facts we were able to get, where people were writing into the council, trying to ask for a change in the law, etc. We were able to show that the community had a chance to say that they were really in favour of having a relaxation of what was then the audibility clause. And it was a set of facts about public opinion, because the licensing board has to take into opinion what Edinburgh's communities thought about it, and when you're having a fact-gathering sort of thing, you're able to show it. Otherwise, they just have a feeling from their community councils, so the people who are most likely to complain about things like noise, about what their actual audience was and who they were serving. But when the wider public is able to give their opinion about whether or not they want to have more music in their city, then it was very open for that. So Census was helpful, and actually the consultation on changing the licensing was very helpful as well.
Passing on then to Tracey Heyworth, Senior Policy Advisor from the Creative Industries team at DCMS. These are policy makers.
Hi. So, unfortunately, policy responsibility for many of the issues that affect grassroots music venues don't sit with DCMS, but what we can do for you is act as a champion. We can coordinate, convene, and make connections for you, all the C's. I just want to give you a quick example of how, when information was presented to us, the sort of thing that we could do about it. So we were given information on the impact of the permitted development right on grassroots music venues. That's where an office block can be turned into a residential block without the need to go through the normal planning process. And obviously this was having an impact on some venues if they were in the vicinity of a new residential development, particularly in relation to noise complaints. So DCMS took a delegation over to the Department for Communities and Local Government, who do hold responsibility for planning legislation. We went with Music Venue Trust, UK Music, the Fleece from Bristol, who were experiencing this personally, and the Musicians' Union to meet the Housing and Planning Minister. The case was put extremely well by those round the table, and as a result, when the permitted development right was made permanent in April last year, a new condition considering noise from existing businesses, such as a music venue, was added, but the onus was put onto the developer to mitigate any negative impact from that noise on the residents.
Passing to Bev.
Thank you. As most of you will know, Music Venue Trust is still quite a young organisation, and in a lot of ways we're kind of playing catch-up, which is why we ally ourselves with partners and we try and pool resources and work together. It's kind of frustrating for us that often we have to talk about London, and I know for those of you that are not in London, that must be very boring when we roll out London stats and we talk about the rescue plan and everything else. But part of the reason we do that is it's one of the only pieces of research that we've had the resources to create. The GLA had the task force, we were part of that, things were created. And so what we find ourselves doing an awful lot, wherever in the country we happen to be, we talk about what's happened in London and we say this is illustrative of the kinds of challenges and the patterns of activity that have happened elsewhere. Now, obviously, what we'd really like to do is we'd like to have more information like's being gathered by the UK Live Music Census, but, even more, we'd like to have a real map of where the grassroots music venues are. We'd like to have real information about whether there's regional differences, whether some things are different in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland. All of that means that we need money, we need time, and we need massive interaction with the people that know. Because a lot of our work so far has been anecdotal, and although we've definitely made progress and we've formed alliances and we've got lots of wonderful champions on our side, it's only through having actual facts and actual evidence rather than anecdotal stuff that we can carry on doing the rest of the things that we really want to do and that everyone that's here today wants to happen.
Thank you very much indeed. Passing to John from IQ Magazine.
So, as a journalist, we obviously rely on facts, figures, research, kind of facts of our business. This is what I used to do my job. I thought as a kind of recent relevant example for this panel, it was something John Speller alluded to earlier. It was a story we did on the Arts Council England and specifically their funding priorities. So we found the spending. I don't know how many of you saw the story, but we found they're spending 0.6% of their total budget on grassroots music venues, and that half the contemporary music budget, 14 million, or that's almost £10,000 a day, is being spent on one venue specifically. So without having that raw information, and also being able to work with someone to interpret it and analyse it, in this case it was Mark and Bev, we kind of worked with them quite closely on the story. We wouldn't have been able to write that story. So I think while for people running grassroots music venues that was maybe quite old news, the fact that you're not getting much money from Arts Council, I think for many other people in other aspects of the industry that was probably a real eye-opener. So facts matter.
Thank you very much. Shain.
So many clever people on this panel. Two things that are interrelated. One is you have to understand that no one is alone. So I've worked in about 50 countries now around the world. We're right now working in over 20. Everyone is experiencing these types of issues, and solutions have been posed, tested, succeeded, failed, all over the world related to issues around planning, licensing, music venues, and so on. One of the things that we all share is land. And we have to understand that we have to change the way that we value land. And I see in our work internationally, one of the solutions is to change the way we talk about things. One of the biggest successes that the Music Venue Trust did was defining the term grassroots music venue. Without being able to define what that means, you can't speak about it. We're right now trying to do the same for another equally complicated term right now. So what we have seen internationally is that in order to change the debate and our facts actually get somewhere, we have to think about the actual language in which we're using. Business rates is a specific issue right now that I think that Mark and myself and a few other people have had to learn how that language is, because I'm not a valuations officer, and I have no experience in that. So what we're trying to do is understand, and when it comes to facts, understanding how to talk about something. We are important, but we're important in the greater ecosystem of our towns and cities. So we have to situate our issue in relation to every other issue. And remember that the value of the land is equally important to the value of what happens inside the building. And that is something that we have to be able to talk about more.
One of the difficulties that you will have is finding the time and the energy and even the motivation sometimes to get engaged when there's nothing particular going on for you. Life's just ticking along, life is busy as usual, there's never enough time in the day, and so on. But then something suddenly hits you from out of the blue. You might not be aware of government changes and policy consultations and all of that, and why should you? And that's fine. But then the developer buys the plot of land next door to you, or new residents move in that don't like the music as much as the last residents did, or there's a change in the seniority in the local police and they've decided they're going to do a crackdown on something, and all of a sudden you are presented with an issue and a problem that just wasn't there before. Or possibly you might want something yourselves out of the system. You might want a change of your own. And that was the electric ballrooms situation. They wanted, this is a well-known Camden venue, 75 years they've been there, you probably know them. And they wanted to expand their capacity by 400, not a massive amount. Not to have 400 extra people in there for every gig, that would be nice, but just to have the potential to have extra capacity to allow them to compete at the next level, as it were. But they're in a cumulative impact zone in Camden, and that might mean more to some of you than to others. It's a policy restraint, and Camden said no. The police were all right about it. Even environmental health in the council were all right about it, and they're the noise people. But the councillors said no, and they said no twice. The second time around, they said, we will have an extra 70 or so conditions. We will impose those on you, and you can bear the cost of those, and you can have 100 extra capacity, but not 400. And the reason for that was... No, nobody knew what the reason for that was. However, Electric Ballroom then had to go to appeal to sort it all out, and it is in that appeal environment that people like me get involved, but a wealth of other experts get involved as well. A number of people in this room, a number of people who were able to bring expert evidence to bear, not just on the local context and the Electric Ballroom context, and their background and their history, but where they sat nationally, within the national picture, grassroots music venues, the closures, the pressure, the problems, the support that there is supposed to be within London, and the support from the Mayor and the Night Tsar and all of these people. We were able to draw down on all of that and come at it from two angles, support the Electric Ballroom, but support music venues generally, and the council caved before we ever actually got into the courtroom as a result of all of this action. And so the Electric Ballroom, going from a bleak place and a difficult situation, and even facing viability problems, suddenly got what they wanted as a result of this collection of information and data about them and about all of you. And the best thing about it was that evidence even went so far as to get them most, if not all, of their costs back. And that was crucial, because these proceedings are expensive. Very little of it goes on me. You wouldn't... I work mostly for Haribo, but don't tell anyone that, will you? But all of this information we were able to use to maximum effect, and that demonstrates why it's so important. I'm going to come back to the panel to see if anybody wants to contribute anything specific off the back of any of things that have been said so far, and then I'm going to open it to the floor for you to ask any questions that you've got about the things that we're talking about, or any examples, or particularly any difficulties that you feel you've got that block you from engaging in this exercise.
There's a great example that I was involved with as well. So I'm sure everyone who in this room is familiar with Section 106 obligations. So who isn't? Because I should explain it. Okay, most of you. Okay, good. No, and if there's a planning consultant, I think, in this room, and I'm wrong, tell me.
No.
But when a developer... And first off, the word developer, they're not all evil. I work for some good ones as well. A number of music venues are being developed around London right now. So, you know, not all of them, but this is a good one. And Section 106 obligations, which I like to call the statue in a roundabout clause, is when you have to, when a certain cost of the value of the development then gets put back to the community. And unfortunately, it doesn't work as well as it should. Often it's a cash contribution to the local authority instead in lieu of providing affordable residential. So i.e. we can build less affordable housing, but then we'll give you some money. But the law is written in such a way so that it's supposed to prioritize community and cultural aims. So in Barking, in East London, the Barking town centre is being completely redeveloped. It'll look very different in 10 years. And the developer who is redeveloping it, they're called London Newcastle. We did an impact assessment for them to look at the value of a prospective music venue, grassroots music venue in that site. And they decided that they would offer the music venue as part of their Section 106 obligations. So what that means is the entire development does not get built unless the music venue gets built. So it was safeguarded into planning. And that's been done on heritage grounds before, i.e. something cool happened here and you have to protect it. But it's, as far as I know, the first time it's ever been done just because the developer wants a music venue. So in 2022, or whenever this gets built, things take time, we will have a new 400, 500 capacity grassroots music venue. And we get to define how that venue is operated. And the developer wants that, so we can keep it independent, we can keep it, and they are understanding of that. I think overall, there were other concessions that had to be made. Unfortunately, that's the way it is, but I think that was a relatively good news story. And that was about defining the value of a music venue in relation to its value on the whole development.
It's a good example. Section 106 agreements in the planning world tie in with the agent of change that you've been told about. There are other innovative ways that it can all be used if you know what you're doing. So people think in terms of developers coming in, the developer block of flats, they are the agent of change. They've got to mitigate their block of flats, and maybe they do with double glazing or whatever, but they can also be made to pay money or invited to pay money to the grassroots music venue over the road to build them an acoustic lobby or to put double glazing in there. So it doesn't have to just be the building that the developer is working on. They can make contributions and pay money to mitigate the change that they're going to bring about in other ways. You can get very creative with it. Anyone else?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, so to reiterate the point, the Department for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport can act as a champion for the music industry, but good evidence and good data is what helps us to make the case to other departments and agencies. So giving us good quality data, you're equipping us to argue better on your behalf. It can also help you in fighting your corner, convincing relevant stakeholders outside of government, those with power to make the changes that they might need to act. So, for example, help with a perception change, which I think is needed at a local level, in getting venues recognised as valuable cultural and creative assets worth protecting, not crime and noise nuisances that need controlling, policing and licensing up to their eyeballs. And also, something that I feel quite strongly about is alerting the broader music industry at the top of the ecosystem, that with all the money, to the very real possibility of the decline in their possibly most important talent pipeline, and not just for bands or artists, but for songwriters and sound engineers and lighting engineers and riggers and everything that helps to make the music industry in this country as brilliant as it is. So data, evidence, give.
I think as well, journalists like to write about what's happening with music venues at the moment, and we seem to get a lot of the same kind of statistics thrown up time and time again. There's a lot of bad news stories, not good news stories. The figure about 35% of music venues shutting in London over a certain period of time. It becomes an echo chamber, and I think at this point it would be great to have a lot more information about what's going on in live music, that it's disseminated so that we get a proper, better, wider live music discussion amongst people. I think that a lot of people are under the understanding now that probably live music will be over in about 10 years, and so we're all sounding this death knell together. And it's not really the case, and I would really like it to have a much more excited and interesting and engaging public conversation, but we need to have the kind of data that goes to press releases that journalists pick up on, actually write about. I get no end of students asking me for help with their dissertations, and the dissertation is on the subject of the fact that all music venues are about to close. And it's really not the case, but we need much better data to show that. And I can't give them much apart from what I have anecdotally.
And can I just add to echo that? So from the UK Music Wish You Were Here report, it's a 1 billion industry for the live sector. 1 billion. for this year's Measuring Music report that was published as well. And just looking at the numbers, it's the fastest growing sector for music. It supersedes musicians and artists, the recorded sector, everywhere else, live is the key. And even from an artist perspective, if you've got nowhere to perform and start finding yourself to develop yourself as an actual musician, to go out there and do things on a grassroots level, you can't make it to the top and go and play at Wembley. It's just never going to happen. So at the moment, we have the numbers for the big arenas for everywhere else, but we need to focus on this because this is so important. This is the stepping stone to get there for everybody. And just to echo what Bev mentioned earlier, the reason why we're always banging on about London, which is what everyone here is, because that's the data that we have that is so accessible to everybody. Michael Duggar previously mentioned that he's about to do a tour around pretty much most of the UK and start speaking to loads of different metro mayors to push and replicate exactly what's happening in London. But to do that on that regional level and to speak to all those different those city mayors, we need to have those numbers because that's what's going to make the change to be able to get things pushed through. And right now we're looking to focus probably on the west of England, Liverpool, the Midlands and also Manchester over the next 12 months for the organisation of UK music. But going after that, we need to start elaborating, going up to the likes of Edinburgh, over to Northern Ireland, also down in Wales as well. There's been a great amount of work done, especially for the Bristol census that took place 2 years ago, that gives an economic impact of exactly what's going on in the live sector for venues. And, you guys are the stepping stone for any platform, for any artist. The money goes to the artist, but you guys really, really represent such a big value for it. And we need to make sure that those numbers come through so that when the discussions happen and the news stories kick in, we've got something that's really robust to be worked with.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in response to your point, it's a valid point that there's an echo chamber, lots of stories about venues closing, but and you can't cover them all, but never underestimate the power of good news. I don't think. I think in terms of some of the success stories. You've got a Half Moon in Herne Hill and what was that one recently? Cellar in Oxford. And
Half Moon was not a good news story.
Was it not?
No.
Okay.
It exists.
Ignore that. The cellar's good. Ignore that. But I'd say never underestimate the power of the press when it comes to when we do have a success story. I mean, Fabric is obviously a really good example. We were a very, very small part of that, but I don't think there'd have been that decision if there wasn't that media backlash. If there wasn't,
I think that in Edinburgh it was actually quite easy to disseminate the good news story. We had a Photoshop picture of the leader of the licensing board with a Stratocaster and I think a black leather jacket. He wasn't wearing it; they just made up the picture of him. But it seemed, the Edinburgh Evening News knew that picture would sell papers, and it was a good news story. It's very great to have that on the front. I think what's good to have as well is, and this is somewhere the live music census is great, is that it's got not just figures about money and economic contribution. And personally, as a venue manager, I'm sometimes wary of those figures because you wonder whether or not they're just taking into account ticket prices or sales over the bar, but also was it the taxi that got you there, and was it also paying the cleaner of the venue, etc. So the figures, when they're financial, can be hard, but also from where I'm sitting, it doesn't necessarily represent all that I have, but what it does cover is lots of various people's opinions in the community, and actually that wider feeling is something, and once it's in something like the census, then it feels more foundational, more like fact than just the anecdotal stuff that I can tell when people ask me about how I feel the music venue is getting on.
Let's open it up for some questions from the floor, and then perhaps our panellists can expand on some of those questions and make some more points that they would wish to make in answering. So based on everything you've heard then, have we got some contributions, any questions you want to ask, or any problems that you think you face in engaging in this exercise, or any examples that you want to give?
Hi, I'm from a venue that hasn't even opened yet, and it's been going for 7 years. It's the Phoenix Centre in Woking. We've had terrible problems trying to get our council on board, and everyone tells us that that's what you need. And it's lovely to hear talking from the government departments about how you can get help. But when we approach the government departments, they just say, well, the local authority, we can't interfere in what they do. And that's all we ever get from everybody. Well, if the local authority's on board, we can't do anything about it. So it's really great to come to things and get hope and inspiration and all that. But actually, when you go back to your town and you're dealing with a council official who's like bloody Mr. Potter off It's a Wonderful Life, it doesn't really make much difference. So what can we do, really?
Well, vote. No
Wait,
one
wait,
votes
Hannah,
in
I can't
local
see where I'm
elections. That's the, no. In all seriousness, we did a licensing issue in Hackney a few years ago, or about 16 months ago, and we set up a number of people set up a campaign called We Love Hackney, and the chair of the licensing at the time, the chair of the licensing committee in Hackney had less votes than the people who signed our petition. Like, that's one thing that is important in local elections, and they are next year. So I'm just the people who are often most impacted by these issues are not voting, and I always find that is something that we need to say. We need to vote.
Where's the speaker? I can't see where you are.
I'm here, right at the back.
I can't see you. I really apologise if I'm not looking.
Edna Mode of the Incredibles.
I'm just going to address the room at large. Do bear in mind your local authority, your council, is made up of different parts. It's not just one monolithic thing. So you can divide and conquer when it comes to licensing, and even when it comes to planning. You need to get the separate ears of separate parts of the council, even separate individuals within the council. So you've got the councillors who are decision makers, who will be sitting on the committee, but then you might also have your ward councillor who won't be sitting on the committee, and that might be someone you can talk to and get their sympathy. You are one of their voters, one of their constituents, and they might understand your situation better if you talk to them personally. You've got the Environmental Health Department. Always keep on their good side, engage with them regularly, get emails from them saying, everything all right? Are you happy with us? Have you had any problems with us recently? So that 6 months down the line, when they say we've had endless complaints, you can say, well, you didn't tell me that when I emailed you 6 months ago, for example. Keep your local police on board, the ground level police, because pressure might come from the senior officers. But if you're cool with your ground officer, your beat officers, your local officers, that will help to diffuse the situation. Planning officers, go and get their ears. So you can speak to different departments and different people and try and get them to understand you're not just dealing with one monolithic entity.
No, I think in our case we've dealt with all the departments and they're fantastic. The officers are fantastic. What we have is a sort of very... a culture of one person that runs it, and unfortunately the person that's against the project is at the top, which is why we've had to go to DCLG, because it's a community project as well as venue, and also to other places, and and the MP as well, and their thing is nothing we can do about it. We can't do anything about controlling local government, and that's where our frustration lies. We hear this at events and it's fantastic, but the reality is that doesn't happen when you're alone project in a massive town.
Well, there are things that you can do, and that's why days like this are so valuable, because it can put you in touch with people who can help you, and there are people who can help you, because there is always someone to go over the head to, and there is always a way of making smaller voices count and shout louder than the one lone voice that is against you. So,
Sarah,
let's talk.
Can I say, when we were trying to get the policy change put through in Edinburgh Council, we had to speak to the councillors, not so much as a bloc, but kind of political party by political party, and the parties had their stances. Obviously, quite different sets of parties in Scotland, but since Labour have a manifesto commitment to agent of change, and you need to get something done that's related to that, I would try and speak to a Labour councillor first, because they are kind of obliged to be on your side for a lot of music-related issues.
You've also got challenge routes as well. If the worst happens and the bad decision is made about you, you then need to know what leverage you've got after that in terms of appeal, complaints, local government ombudsman, that kind of thing. And if you know your rights and you know what you can do, you can then bring that to bear, even as people are deciding what they're going to do, to say, well, of course, if you do it wrong, this is what we'll do next. That can help.
Sarah, can I just come back to something about why Music Venue Trust exists now? And the point is, all of these are really good suggestions, but I can imagine that an awful lot of the venues are sitting there thinking, well, okay, as well as programming my venue and getting the bar run and organising my staff rota and everything else, I've now got to learn about how the political parties work and what every department in the local authority do and what happens at government level and access to finance. And the point is, we know this is your biggest challenge. We know that this is why some venues can't fight these things. We are trying to do everything we can. We are trying to give you this advice, but it's one of the reasons that Music Venue Trust needs to grow. Because yes, we need facts, we need information, but then we also need the ability to do something with that information when we've got it. And that's very much the stumbling block at the moment, which is that, you know, you can see from how many people there are in the room today, how many people are on the delegate list. This is a growing organisation, these are growing issues. And, you know, we're working as hard as we can within the capacity we've got. Obviously, there's still a lot of work for us to do there to try and support you to do that. We're not saying you've all got to become experts on everything. What we're saying is try and learn a little bit about lots of these things so that when you have to talk to an expert in it, what they say makes sense. And the other thing to say is, yes, we're all saying we need more information. That does not mean we are going to send you weekly questionnaires. The piece of work we are going to try and do is try and draw together the information that is needed and agree on a one time a year that you might have time to fill in one questionnaire that gives us the information we can work with over the next 12 months. We're not there yet. Please bear with us on that. But we are, all of us, very aware of the constraints on your time, on the tiny size of your teams, because we're a tiny team too. But this is all food for thought. These are all things to just try and, you know, get your heads around and think, well, I don't know that, but I know someone that does, or, you know, we're not expecting you to be experts in everything. We're just raising the issues.
But get plugged into your network, because we're all here to help. That's the whole point of a day like today. You get to meet people who do know the answers and who can help you. And when it's your time, reach out for that help, because it is there.
Hello, I've got a question over here. My name is Mike Watson. I'm the chair of a charity that runs the Wickham Arts Centre. We've only been going about 5 years. But I'm also a musician. And the reason why I got into this in the first place is I wanted a venue to play. But I've been driven over my many years of life by the desire and the dreams fed by being a musician and wanting to play the bigger venues. But also, you mentioned Stratocaster. I'm actually a drummer. But I wrote down... these companies, Marshall, Allen & Heath, Sennheiser, Mackie, Premier, Pearl, Roland, Yamaha, Tama, Gibson, Fender, Boozy & Hawkes, Akai, Pioneer, Denon, Korg, loads and loads of music retail companies, music manufacturing companies who are fundamental for driving the dreams of musicians. And it's the musicians who buy this gear, that learn these instruments, that's what drives them to want to play these venues. So part of the ecosystem, and without doubt I came to this venue last time, and the work that the Music Venues Trust is doing is fantastic, but I would like to see some outreach into these multi-million companies who should be coughing up. They're the people who are funding and creating these dreams and these musicians want to play. But these are the people who are responsible for part of the ecosystem. And these are the people that should be helping facilitate live music venues for the dreams of musicians and obviously the dreams of all of us here into making venues successful.
Good point. Time for one more question. Come on. Oh, 3 now.
I'm from Princess Playhouse in Eastbourne. It's a very, very small, new venue, and we're a free entry venue. And I know there's a sort of intake of breath from artists particularly, that we can only operate on the basis of a percentage of the bar take for artists. And we wish we could do more, but it's fragile out there for small venues. We're all about the music, and we're all about local network of artists who support us. How big a part of the Music Venues Trust sort of picture are free entry venues? And is there a sort of a particular set of issues there that that sort of relate to us, and should we aspire to get to the point where we charge? At the moment, it's just not within our reach.
I can answer that with some facts. And that is that Eventbrite have just published a report about the, I can't remember what it's called, but it's about the activities of millennials. And younger people are drinking less and less alcohol. They are much less interested in going out for a drink, but they are very interested in activity. They like things to do, things that engage them, things they can share with people. What this means is the traditional model of any money made can go straight to the artist and it's okay, the bar will pay for everything else, is not going to work as we move into the future. And for that reason, Music Venue Trust, although we know it does happen and we understand why people want it to happen, we're not huge advocates of it's free entry because you'll buy some drinks and everyone will muck along and it'll all be fine. We believe that music has a value and that actually it's not unreasonable to ask people to pay to come and enjoy good quality music in a good quality environment with good sound with other people that also love music. So I actually did have an email recently from someone saying to me that they'd run their venue for X number of years and they were struggling to provide their 4 nights of free music per week, and what could they do about it? And I wrote back and I said, start charging. So although that might sound a little bit unsympathetic, because I absolutely understand where the model comes from, and we do have lots of MVA members that put on some free nights, we have an awful lot of members that charge peanuts, quite frankly, for what they're putting on. But times are changing and you do have to look at your business model, and we are not a great source of advice about how to continue to offer free nights, to be honest.
But I can think of a couple of examples that do sort of work. So during the Edinburgh Festival, we have got lots of free fringe stuff, which means you go in, it's free to come in, but you kind of have to pay to go out, or they encourage you to. And they now this apply to bands as well as comedy shows. And people essentially pay what they like. I'm just back from a couple of days in Nashville. And in Nashville on the main strip, all of the bars are free entry, but it's absolutely expected, and maybe because it's a tipping for service culture there, all the punters in the bars are expected to tip the bands, especially for requests. Now, it's not how my venue operates, it's not how I would like to see most venues operate, but there might be something in that where if punters don't want to pay as they go in, then maybe they pay as they go out. But I think there's something in having a captive audience where they're paid something. Our weeknight club nights all used to be free entry. We're making a lot more money now in bar sales since we started charging in, because people don't walk in not sure about it and walk out. They paid maybe £2 on a weekday and they'll want to stay, and they do spend more.
So I'm going to draw that one to a close for today. If you still have questions and burning issues, do come and find people. I'm sure everyone will be very happy to talk to you on a one-to-one. But that is your panel for now. Can I say thank you very much indeed to all our panellists.